The Changeling by Victor Laval is a 2017 novel, fantasy novel by Victor Laval, who I've read before. The Ballad of Black Tom, a novella that was a sort of a retelling of a Lovecraft, racist Lovecraft story, very xenophobic Lovecraft story of the horror at a Red Hook, but told through and with a main protagonist, which was black. Was a black man. I don't know. That story wrestled with things, wrestled with Lovecraft and with kind of the the racist undertow of a lot of the othering in horror fiction. The Changeling, as by the title you might tell, is a thing that is taking on fairy tales this time, and I'm suck at doing summaries at the beginning, and God knows it's taken me a minute to get to here already. So I'm going to read this summary from Goodreads. One man's thrilling adventure through an enchanted world to find his wife, who has disappeared after seemingly committing an unforgivable act of violence. Apollo Kagwa has had strange dreams that have haunted him since childhood. An antiquarian book dealer with a business called Improbabilia, he is just beginning to settle into his new life as a committed and involved father, unlike his own father who abandoned him, when his wife Emma begins acting strange. Disconnected and uninterested in their new baby boy, Emma at first seems to be exhibiting all the signs of postpartum depression. But it quickly becomes clear that her troubles go far beyond that. Before Apollo can do anything to help, Emma commits a horrific act beyond any parent's comprehension and vanishes, seemingly into thin air. His quest begins when he meets a mysterious stranger, William Wheeler, who claims to have information about Emma's whereabouts. Apollo then begins a journey that takes him to a forgotten island in the East River of New York City, a graveyard full of secrets, a forest in Queens where immigrant legends still live, and finally back to a place he thought he had forever lost. This dizzying tale is ultimately a story about family and the unfathomable secrets of the people we love. So yes, that is The Changeling. So, as with the Ballad of Black Tom, I was slightly kind of torn as to the success of this book. In the kind of the opening kind of third of the book, it is very kind of grounded in reality. It has a lot of tactile things, a lot of psychological realism to it. But as we go along, it gets to a certain point, and the fairy tale elements, I think, seem to take over. And it sort of switches into kind of fairy tale psychology, and also maybe by the end, it felt like wish fulfillment to me, in a way that seemed to portray the earlier kind of more kind of grounded things. Laval has a beautiful language. I listened to the audiobook, and I liked him as a narrator. I do not like actorly narrations of books, but let's pause for a second. And in addition to that, there was sort of an effort to kind of mix the technological with the magical. Actually, there's a good hunk of this novel that I was like, oh, is it actually going to turn out to be kind of a techno horror story that was kind of masquerading as a fairy tale story? That spoiler, that turns out not to be true. But I mean, it is a book where we have a Norwegian troll, but kind of mixed with an actual kind of internet troll with the kind of the associated kind of like the toxic masculinity and kind of white supremacy mixed in there. Because of the news events at the moment, as a white person, that actually kind of brought up more to me of being more aware of that, Apollo Kagwa, a black man in America at this time. It's like all through the book, it's just sort of taken as a given that he has to be super careful because he could be shot by the police at any moment. He has to be on a certain kind of level of behavior. He has to have a certain level of smarts. He can't be in a neighborhood after dark, or else he will have an encounter with the police, and that could go horribly wrong, which is a part of the kind of the realism of the thing. But it's also it is that there's kind of an uneasy mix there, I think, of the fairy tale elements, which sometimes I felt like the fairy tale elements were used to kind of paper over what were maybe like kind of weak psychological elements in the book. There's also the thing of Apollo himself. Is Apollo isn't one of these monsters. He's an in the parlance of the book. He's a new dad. He is at the beginning of the novel. He's like a caring new dad, sharing all his photos with his of his kids online because he's such a proud father and he helps with the raising of the kid. Um, Yet we have a thing of a certain sort of there's a certain sort of blame. A part of it is the posting the pictures online for other people to see. The other part is he doesn't seem to be. There's a failing. It's this horror movie kind of logic of there's a failing of how well he does actually support his wife when she slips into depression. And I'm not quite sure how much the book kind of holds him responsible for what happens. In some ways it just feels like it happens to him. There's a lot of stuff that just seems to happen to him in the book, which seems to be like I half wanted him to have more. I mean, he does exhibit some very kind of violent, vengeful attitudes, but they kind of come from a place that you can sort of see, yeah, that makes sense. If someone had done that, I would be incredibly angry myself. Um, though there's other parts where he just grabs a gun and takes people hostage, and you're like, I don't know if I can go that far. Like if I can make that psychological leap. This is where we get into the kind of the fairy tale elements that kind of mix. There is also the thing of yes, there's a part of the thing. There's that kind of horror movie logic of he shares pictures of his kid online, and that in some ways is it's like at the beginning of a horror movie when two teenagers have sex. Well, then they're going to die because they had sex together. In some ways in this novel he shares lots of pictures of his kid online, and that is the thing. I think someone says to him at some point that you can in horror things, vampires can't come into your house unless you invite them. Posting online is like leaving your front door open and telling any creature of the night it can enter, which is kind of the scolding speech that is given by a character to Apollo in the novel. And it did feel like a scolding, like we're going to use kind of fairy tale imagery to scare scare parents straight, which is like there is something to be said for exactly how you share information online and stuff like this. But that felt like that felt like reefer madness to me or something like that, where it was like, okay, yeah, you there's maybe some valuable information there, but my eyes are rolling a bit because this also seems to be a lot of scariness about technology kind of stuff. So which isn't to say there shouldn't be some caution in that, but it's just I didn't enjoy how that was delivered. So yeah, in the end, I'm sort of mixed. It was really well written. I didn't find Apollo to be that strong of a character. I found that the ending to be a bit of a letdown. But still, it was an interesting ride, and it raised a lot of interesting issues. Um, Sort of, it's like Neil, and I'm also, I have to say at the very end of this, I'm not a fairy tale guy. There's a lot of times that when like Neil Gaiman goes into fairy tale stuff, I just find I don't care, which is interesting because I like other fantasy, more sword and sorcery fantasy, stuff that is less overtly metaphorical in its way. There is a bit of it that is like, is this a something with them? Like there's some at some point they say like, oh, a fairy tale has been bastardized into something with a moral at the end. Yet there's a lot of ways that this felt like, oh, there was a moral at the end. You don't share all your information about your kids online, which it's one of those things of, I would hope if this is a responsible parent, you would share pictures of everything to your immediate bubble of your family, but you would probably avoid putting that out into the thing and letting predators know where your kids are at all times and stuff like that. So yeah, so it felt like it was a fairy tale with a moral at the end. So that's my review of The Changeling by Victor LaValle.